Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. Please visit our website, cscatlanta.org, for a complete list of live and recorded events. If this is your first time participating, we invite you to complete a new attendee form to stay connected to all future programs.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for this nutrition seminar, part 2 on macronutrients. This is Emily Brown, the Program Director at Cancer Support Community Atlanta. Thank you for joining us today for another monthly nutrition seminar with Kristin Cuculovski. This is part 2 of her previous presentation on macronutrients, and today's topic being protein and fat. So without further ado, Kristin, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Emily, and welcome everybody, and happy September. I am glad to be here. Like Emily said, this is part 2 of our macronutrient series, if you will. So I did confirm they have already loaded part 1 onto the website. So if you missed last month's presentation and need to go back and watch that, it is available on the website for the cancer support community. So I do have a little bit of a review in here for those who missed it, just so we're not completely lost, but they're a little bit separate of topics here. So I also like to give a disclaimer at the beginning of each presentation that this is more of a community-based presentation, and it's geared a little bit more towards survivorship versus if you're actively going through treatment. That's not to say that you can't do some of this stuff if you're actively going through treatment right now. I just aware that maybe some of the things won't make sense for you if you're having a lot of side effects from your treatment, and that we do have dietitians here at Northside within our oncology clinics, both for medical oncology and radiation, that can help answer very specific questions, or maybe you need some more one-on-one counseling. We can do that through those dietitians. This is a little bit more of an overview or more general for a lot of different people. So keep that in mind. If you're not in the Northside network for your cancer care, a lot of the other healthcare systems around Atlanta also have dietitians that are specific to oncology that can help you if you go to Emory or Piedmont or Wellstar. So with that being said, let's just dive right in. So macronutrients are the 3 main nutrients, the biggest ones that help to nourish our body. So they are nutritive components of food that our bodies need for energy, maintain our body structure, and to help keep our body functioning. So 3 nutrients that make up macronutrients are our carbohydrate foods, protein, and fat. So last month we talked about carbohydrates. This month we're going to talk about protein and fat. So that's why those are bolded. And just as a disclaimer, no healthy diet should ever exclude or seriously restrict any of these macronutrients. So if you are looking and exploring different diet options of something to help follow or get you on the right path, if anything significantly cuts out one of these macronutrients, it's usually not a great idea, or it's not going to be a very sustainable option for you for long term. So that's what we're here to help teach you and show you the foods that you want to choose out of these food groups, and then maybe some foods that you can kind of stay away from if that meets your health needs better. So I always like to share this plate and the plate that's on the next slide, because this really gives us the foundation for how our meals should look. So this is what the American Institute for Cancer Research calls their New American Plate. And this is very helpful for meal planning or trying to think through some of your meals to make sure that you're getting a very balanced meal or snack. And it just creates a really nice visual. And this specific plate, again, comes from the American Institute for Cancer Research, and they do a lot of the nutrition and lifestyle research that's specific to cancer and cancer patients and survivors on reducing your cancer risk, reducing your family's cancer risk, and reducing your risk of recurrence if you've already had cancer. The general gist here is focusing on foods that are rich in fiber, vitamins, phytonutrients to help protect us against cancer. And if you look at the plate over on the side, you'll see that 2/3 of the plate or more should be vegetables, fruit, whole grains, and beans. So those are a lot of your carbohydrate foods. We talked about those last week. So again, if you missed last month. So if you missed last month's presentation, that's 2/3 of your plate right there that you may want to go back and review just to make sure that you understand what the majority of your diet should look like here. So it also includes a modest 3 to 4 ounce serving of meat. So that could be fish, poultry, red meat. So that's an animal protein. So if you're not eating animal products, you're more of a vegetarian or a vegan, that is perfectly fine. You would just substitute this area with a plant-based protein of some kind. So we'll talk about that when we get to our protein section. And then the other thing about this plate that you want to keep in mind is that it has a variety of food on it. So you see a lot of different colors, you see a lot of different textures, you just see a lot of different things on here. And so that's also important for our overall health because again, the different kinds of foods, the different colors, the different, whole grain versus vegetable, they all have different nutrients that they're helping to nourish our body and provide different vitamins and minerals. And again, those phytonutrients that help to protect us against cancer and also heart disease, diabetes, other chronic illnesses too. So they all play a part. So you want to try to have as much variety as you can. And sometimes that's a little bit difficult if you're only cooking for 1 or maybe 2 people, but there's always a way to work around that throughout the course of the week. So maybe you don't have super different plates for a day or 2 in a row because you're eating leftovers, but that's okay. Everything always works out by the end of the week. You'll also notice within the variety of these foods that there are 2 different kinds of vegetables. So there's really even more than that on this specific plate. And again, that's important because you're getting different colors, you're getting different textures, different things. So every little difference, like a green vegetable has different nutrients than a red vegetable does, but both are very healthy options. Sometimes people are always like, what's the healthiest vegetable? And it's very hard to say because you want to have different colors because they all provide different things for you. And then the other part of this plate is a healthy serving of a tasty whole grain. So again, that was covered last month if you need to catch up on that. And then this is another plate method. So it's very similar to the previous plate, but for whatever reason, I'm a little bit more drawn to this one, but it's really the same concept that you're going to be using to make your meal planning easier. It's helping you to balance out your nutrients on your plate. Obviously, every meal that you eat is not going to be on a plate. It could be in a bowl. It could be mixed all together. It could be a salad. This is just like a general guide for you to help build meals until you're comfortable eyeballing it and looking at something and you're like, oh, I can put a meal together just without a visual. I'm a visual learner, so I like to throw them out there here. And you'll see this plate throughout our presentation too. So we'll come back and we'll be mostly focusing today on our protein section, but we're also covering fat. But you'll notice that fat's not really any of the sections on here. It's normally something that's added in during your cooking, or maybe you have it on the side for some reason. So just to do a really quick review of what we talked about last month with carbohydrates, I spent an entire hour on this topic and we're only getting one slide here. So carbohydrates are the primary energy source for our body, and that's what it uses to help keep it functioning. And you'll see over on the right-hand side was more about blood sugar control, whether or not you have diabetes. So we really focused on more complex carbohydrates and choosing carbohydrates that have fiber or starch in them versus having a lot of added sugar or more like simple sugar foods. Because what we want at the end of the day when we're eating is to have our blood sugars looking like this nice little curve down here at the bottom. And we want to try to avoid these big roller coaster spikes and dips in our blood sugar. That will help to keep you feeling more stable throughout the day. It will help you to not lumps and energy like an afternoon, like right after your lunch. If you eat a lot of simple sugars, you might have a initial energy kick, but then you kind of crash. And so that's kind of this roller coaster, and we want to try to avoid that. And so last month when we talked, it was mostly about choosing those fiber and starch foods. But the other really cool thing about our blood sugars is that when you eat an actual balanced meal and you're also including foods that have protein and foods that have fat, that also helps to balance our blood sugars too. So we'll get more of a little line that looks like this after our meals. and less of a roller coaster up here. So hopefully that makes sense. The big gist of last month was focus on carbohydrate foods that have fiber or starch, and then limiting those simple added sugars that a lot of processed foods tend to have, or adding sugar to things that you're making or drinking your coffee, that kind of stuff. So we will jump right into protein. So protein is also very essential for a range of life-sustaining functions. So when patients come to me and they tell me that they're fatigued or they're tired or they're hungry an hour after they eat, I always ask what they've been eating, and it's usually protein foods are missing or it's not enough protein foods. So again, these can come from animals or they can come from plants. So no matter which way you like to eat, either way is going to work here. We do tend to talk more about animal protein, but I also have a lot of slides on plant-based proteins too, because they're going to be very important. But the thing with protein is our bodies really don't store protein except in our muscle mass, and it's usually stored, it breaks it all the way down into what they call an amino acid. So an amino acid is like a little building block. If you think about little Legos, every amino acid is like a little Lego, and to build a whole protein, you have to connect a lot of those Legos together to get a full protein. So once it's already stored into our muscle mass, it's really quite the ordeal to get it broken down to be able to utilize protein. So if you're not eating enough protein, really the only place that our body is going to be storing a large amount of those amino acids is in our muscle. And so your body starts to break down muscle mass. So if you went through treatment and there were times when you skipped meals or skipped weeks of meals and you started feeling weak and tired and fatigued, and you noticed that your muscle mass was less, or it's harder to pick up something, you just didn't have that same strength, that could have been what caused part of that. So we definitely want to protect our muscle mass, especially as we age, just in general. We start to lose muscle mass as we get older. So really focusing on getting these protein foods in, but also exercise helps to protect that muscle mass too. So protein helps to build and repair cells. That includes your red blood cells and all of your other counts that your doctors are looking at while you're going through treatment. Again, maintaining muscle mass, keeping you strong, keeping you able to move around and do the things that you like to do. Protein also oxygenates our red blood cells, which helps to get all of these nutrients around the different tissues in our body. Protein helps to regulate different hormones that we have in our bodies. And then it also aids in digestion. So when you eat a protein, protein's very filling, just like fiber. So when you're adding these protein foods in with your meals, you're going to stay fuller for longer because it takes our body a little bit more time to digest. So it keeps you feeling full. So if you're ever looking at a nutrition facts label, the protein's going to be down towards the bottom in this little red box that I have highlighted here. A lot of our protein foods don't come with a food label. If you're buying, a pack of chicken or a bag of beans or something at the store, they don't always have a nutrition facts label on them. So you may not always be able to gauge how much protein is in that, but we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But if you do have a nutrition facts label, you can find it down here. It's just a very simple protein, 3 grams is in this serving here. And then as far as how much protein you need, everybody's a little bit different, but in general, it's 10 to 35% of your calories. And that doesn't really speak a whole lot unless you know how many calories that you actually need in a day. And every day can be a little bit different depending on what you have going on. So if you're actively going through treatment, you most likely have increased protein needs where you're going to need more protein to help keep up with some of this repair and healing in between treatments. And most people tend to get their protein in. It just may not be in a very good pattern, or you're just kind of nibbling throughout the day and it ends up being okay by the end of the day, but you really want to focus on trying to get like 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. So if you're eating 3 to 4 larger meals per day, that's where that 20 to 30 grams of protein will come in. So I'm just going to let you think about that for just a moment. The other thing about protein, if you're actively going through treatment, a lot of our protein foods is what starts to taste bad or that you start to avoid because it might make you feel nauseated. So protein tends to be one of those foods that we see patients start skipping and avoiding because it just doesn't make them feel very good. So we just have to focus on different protein during that time to make sure you're still nourishing your body the way that you want it to be nourished. All right, so there's a lot of different kinds of foods that have protein in them. So I'm going to start with our plant-based proteins because the American Institute for Cancer Research recommends a plant-based diet, but that doesn't mean that it has to be vegetarian or vegan. It can be if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. So if you still eat animal proteins, you like your chicken, you like fish, you may still want to consider adding in some of these protein sources throughout your week to help get all the health benefits that they offer to. So the recommendation is at least servings per week, and a serving is going to be a half cup cooked. So it's basically any of your beans. Peas are on here, your tofu, tempeh is on here, edamame, lentils are on here, and I went ahead and put how many grams of protein in parentheses are in a half cup cooked. So black beans is 8 grams. So if you're looking at 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal, you may have to do a cup of black beans. That way you're at least getting 16 grams. And then there are other foods that you're going to be eating with that meal that probably have protein. So if you like things like brown rice or quinoa or some of your other whole grains, not only do they have fiber, they also have protein. So you're going to be getting kind of the best of both worlds there, and you're going to reach that 20 grams. So you don't have to be too worried. These numbers look a little bit lower than what they would if you ate, you know, a piece of chicken, but that's perfectly fine. You just have to be aware of it and make sure you're getting a full cup serving here, and making sure that you're pairing it with some other things that might just have, you know, 2 or 3 grams of protein, and every little bit counts to get you up to that 20 to 30 grams. So hopefully that is not too confusing here, but really these sources are going to be great for protein. And again, even if you are still eating animal protein, you definitely want to try to add in these because they're actually anti-inflammatory. And so they help to bring down any inflammation that might be festering in your body, which can happen when you're going through cancer treatment. It just helps to lower that with all those phytonutrients. And the nice thing also about plant-based proteins is they typically also have a lot of fiber in them. So you're getting, again, the best of both worlds, because if you're having to get to 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day, plus your protein, and you can have one food that meets both of that to help get you to that goal, it's going to really cut down on the worry of trying to fit all that in, which is great. And I was telling Emily right before here, if you were on last month, I told everybody that I had my cholesterol checked and that it was high, and my interventions for myself was to increase my 25 to 35 grams per day, and then I was really monitoring fat intake, and I actually dropped my cholesterol by 37 points in 3 months. So fiber is super helpful for managing a lot of different conditions. So I just wanted to share that in case anybody was in suspense about what happened with my blood work there. I still have a little work to do, but we're going to keep on course. That was a note. Other high quality proteins that are also still anti-inflammatory, just like your plant-based ones, are your fish. So a lot of fish have omega-3 fatty acids in them, and then they also have good protein sources. So those omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. Again, it helps to bring down some of that inflammation that happens throughout treatment and just general. So the current recommendation is 3 to 4 servings per week of fish, and a serving is 3 to 4 ounces cooked. So if you think about salmon, I try to use this example from back when we used to be able to eat out. If you ordered salmon at a restaurant, a lot of times the salmon fillet that you get is like 10 to 12 ounces of meat or fish. So only 3 to 4 ounces is a serving, which is about the size of a deck of cards. Or also if you're a woman, it could be like the palm of your hand here, and about the same width too. So think of cards, and that is the normal like 4-ounce serving of fish there. So it's not to say you can't eat the whole thing if you really were hungry, but just know it could be double or triple the amount that you need for that one setting. So usually with the 3 to 4 ounces of cooked, you're going to get anywhere between 20 and 30 grams of protein just from that 4 ounces. So if you're kind of mentally building your plate by that 20 to 30 grams, that's going to meet your protein needs for that specific meal. And then other proteins would be like your veggie burgers, and those are very different depending on the brand that you're looking at. So everybody, again, kind of wants me to give you a specific brand to kind of lean towards, but really they're all very different. So you might find one that's just like a black bean based, or you might find one that has different like peas and stuff in there. The biggest thing is you want to look for veggie burgers that don't have a lot of added preservatives or like words that you don't know. Sometimes that's a good idea to look up, but your first word in that ingredient list should be some kind of a plant-based protein, like a bean, a black bean, a split pea, something that's more whole versus like a soy isolate conglomerate of some kind that they stick together. So there are several good versions out there, but there's also very highly processed ones too that you just might be a little leery of. Egg whites are a great source of protein. Chicken or turkey breast and a whey protein isolate powder, or really most of your protein powders, are going to be a good option. So I have them listed here. They're not anti-inflammatory, but they also don't cause inflammation that we know of. These are like very good neutral proteins that if you're eating animal proteins that you can add these in throughout the week in between your 3 to 4 ounces of beans and your 3 to 4 servings of beans and your 3 to 4 servings of fish throughout the week. And then this bottom list here, these are actually foods that can cause inflammation. So you just want to make sure you're eating them less frequently. Not to say you can't never have them. It's just you want to be aware that they could cause some inflammation in your system. So shellfish is one that always shocks people. So crab, shrimp, and scallops. Usually it has to do with like the saturated fat content in these foods that makes them more inflammatory. Lean red meats. This is definitely because of the saturated fat that comes, that marbling like throughout a steak, or I got pork chops recently and they had like a big thing of fat on the side. So that is where that inflammation part comes from in these foods. But lamb and venison are also included here. So somebody is drawing on my slides here, Emily. I don't know how to fix that, but I know that's what prevented me from being able to control my screen last time. But with lean red meats, the American Institute for Cancer Research does say that 12 to 18 ounces per week would be okay. Some of the heart healthy recommendations would be to be well below that per week for those lean red meats. So if you are going to eat them, try to pick words that are, or cuts that are round, loin, like a sirloin, tenderloin. Those tend to be a little bit more leaner than like a ground chuck would be. And then for egg yolks, limiting to 3 to 4 per week. I actually read somewhere this week, 6 whole eggs per week is usually okay, like 1 per day. But the yolk part has the saturated fat in there, but it also has a lot of other good nutrition in there as well. And then you definitely want to avoid, at all costs if you can, processed meats like bacon, sausage, hot dogs, bologna, salami. These are known to be carcinogens and to cause cancer, and there's not really a safe amount that's been established what to eat for that. So the best recommendation is to avoid those if you can. Let me try to figure out how to get this little red thing off of here. All right. There we go. So dairy and dairy alternatives. So these foods, typically we think about them for calcium or for vitamin D, but they also tend to be good protein sources. Foods are considered a source of saturated fat that can fuel inflammation. We get a lot of questions about this for our cancer patients. So choosing non-fat or low-fat options for your milks, your yogurts, cottage cheese, those are going to have little to no saturated fat in them, so they shouldn't be causing inflammation in that realm. And then if you're lactose intolerant, obviously don't drink or eat things that have lactose in them, but you can do more calcium fortified plant-based milks, or they're coming out with more lactose intolerant friendly milks on the market now too, that kind of get rid of that lactose, or they add an enzyme to help your body break it down for you. And then serving sizes for these foods, it's 1 cup of milk or milk alternatives. And so 1 cup is 8 ounces. Now that we all have bigger cups or glasses, you know, this one's like a 20-ounce cup here. I know my drinking cups at home are at least 16 ounces. So we just have to keep in mind that it's an 8-ounce serving for liquid things, and then a 1/2 cup for cottage cheese, and 1 ounce for like a more solid cheese. So skim milk or 1% milk is on here. As far as the yogurts go, I really lean towards a non-fat Greek yogurt, because the Greek yogurts tend to have like anywhere from 12 to 15 grams of protein, where just a normal yogurt that's not a Greek yogurt has like 4 to 6 grams of protein. So you must get double or triple if you choose a Greek yogurt. And usually people, if you haven't had before, you just have to try a couple different brands to find a texture that you like, because they texture over a regular yogurt. So don't give up after trying just one. You want to try some different varieties until you find one that works for you. Cottage cheese, again, a low fat or a skim cottage cheese. Buttermilk, kefir, cheese, 2% or lower fat. Soy milk, lactate, again, is a lactose intolerant friendly milk. Almond milk, oat milk, rice milk. I mean, every time I turn on the TV, I feel like there's a different kind of milk that is coming out. You just want to make sure that you find one that's calcium fortified, and most of them are, for the most part now, because that's what most people think of when they're using those foods, is that they're getting their calcium. The only problem with like the nut milks or the oat milks or the rice milks, those tend to be lower in protein. So you might only see 2 or 3 grams of protein in there, versus if you got, again, a Greek yogurt that had 15 grams or a skim milk that has 12 grams of protein. You just want to be mindful that it may not be a protein source for you, but it's still a good option for you as far as calcium goes here. All right. Plate here, and I gave this handout to Emily, so you should have access to it either in the chat box or she'll email it out. But on the front is the actual plate, and then on the backhand side of the handout is all of the food groups and foods that fall into those food groups. So again, we're focusing on the protein foods over here, and there is a great entire column of our protein foods, whether you like animal proteins or you're leaning more towards plant-based proteins. So over towards the right-hand side, in one of the middle columns, there's a protein. And again, it reminds you that 3 to 4 ounces of meat or seafood is going to be considered a serving. And then you also have some, again, plant-based options or non-animal like meat type options. So, you know, some people will still do cottage cheese or cheese and some animal products, just not a full animal. And then there's also the dairy column too. So again, those foods can be considered under the protein depending on how much protein is in the option that you're choosing. And then you'll also see beans and legumes under the starchy side too, but they're, we know, are also going to be considered protein. So this part gets just a little bit tricky sometimes for people because we want the plate to be perfectly portioned. But if you're going to be leaning more towards some plant-based options or adding some beans as your protein source, you just kind of take out that piece of chicken over here and you add in your beans. And you may also, I mean, a full cup might be your serving. So that's going to be 2 servings of beans for you, but 1 serving of protein. And then you can still add a little bit of grain. So you might be a little heavier on the fiber and the carbohydrates compared to somebody who still eats animal products, but that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You still try to get your non-starchy vegetables in and your fruits and stuff as well. You just kind of changed your protein source around. So again, building your meals here, we're looking at our fiber to be 5 to 15 grams per meal. So sometimes that'll be a little bit lower towards the 5. Sometimes you might find something that's really high in fiber, or you're doing a meatless Monday and you're having beans and a starch at the same meal. So you might have a pretty high fiber content for that meal, which is great. And then your protein, you're looking at 20 to 30 grams per meal. If you're doing a snack, I usually say about 10 to 15 grams. Snacks is where a lot of people get in trouble, where they just grab a bag of chips or they'll just grab an apple. And that really only has the carbohydrates in there. They don't have any protein or fat. So you just want to make sure you're trying to add a protein in every time you're eating. And then we're going to go into fat, but fat's going to make up about 10 to 20 grams of fat per meal as well. All right, so moving on to fat. So total fat, if you're looking at the food label, it's going to be towards the top of the food label breakdown underneath your calories. And typically you're looking for 50 to 60 grams of fat per day. And the daily recommended intake would be anywhere from 20 to 35% of your total calories for the day, which breaks down into about 50 to 60 grams a day. And every 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So fat has more calories in it per gram. If you're looking at a carbohydrate, like 1 carbohydrate has 4 calories, or 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. So I think most of us know that fat does have more calories. So you eat a little bit less of it, but we still need fat to help with a lot of body functions and to keep us alive. So we don't want to do no fat by any means. So we're always looking at the total fat to be around 50 to 60 grams. And we're going to break down saturated, unsaturated fats too. But that total fat number really consists of your saturated fat, your trans fats, and then sometimes the food label will have unsaturated fats, and sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on, it's not required. So I think companies just kind of decide whether or not they want to add it. But, you know, for this specific, got a total of 8 grams and it only has 1 gram of saturated fat, it's safe to assume that 7 grams is going to be unsaturated fat. They just don't have it broken down for us. But the trans fat, you definitely want to avoid trans fat when at all possible. So most foods come out and they've changed their formulations to avoid trans fats. So a lot of the times you're going to see that it's 0 grams. It's kind of hard to even find a food label now that has trans fats listed with like a number. But the other sneaky part that they can get away with here is that if it has less than 0.5 grams, they don't have to put it on here. So if this food had 0.4 grams of trans fat, it wouldn't have to be listed. They could still put it as 0. So you do want to check the ingredient list, and anything that's like a hydrogenated oil of some kind is usually going to be a trans fat. So they're normally found in stuff like cakes, cookies, baked goods, sometimes crackers, just more of those packaged processed foods. So you just want to check the food label and make sure there's nothing in there that's a hydrogenated fat, and just be cautious of that, even if it says 0 grams of trans fat. And then your unsaturated fat is going to be your monounsaturated and your polyunsaturated fats. So your polyunsaturated fats are usually your omega-3 and omega-6s that you'd find like in fish, and monounsaturated fats are more omega-3s. And those are what we would call like your good fats, where saturated is more like your bad fat. We don't like to label things good and bad, but it makes it a little easier to remember. And then cholesterol doesn't necessarily have calories in there, but it's still kind of listed in that same section of the fat on the food label here. So our healthy fats help us to produce hormones. So there are a lot of hormones that our body needs on a daily basis to help us function and to keep things moving and just to keep us alive. So we want to make sure that we are eating enough fat to help with those hormones. It also helps to transport our vitamins. So we have what we call fat soluble vitamins, and that's vitamin A, vitamin D, Everybody's always worried about vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K, and those require fat of some kind to help get transported and to be absorbed. So that is why we also want to make sure that we're getting fats throughout the day, because those are important vitamins for us. And then they also help to build new cells. So all of the outside layers of our cells are a little lipid layer that's made out of fats. So it's important when we're trying to generate new cells throughout our body. And then, of course, we want to lean more heavily towards unsaturated fats. So the mono and polyunsaturated that have those omega-3s and those omega-6 fatty acids. And those actually have an anti-inflammatory property. So when we went over the fish slide and I said that that was an anti-inflammatory protein, it's because of these unsaturated fats that a lot of those fish have that help to make it that anti-inflammatory. And a lot of our beans, they don't have a whole lot of fat in them, but they also have a little bit of this unsaturated fat as well that also helps to make them anti-inflammatory on top of the fiber and the other nutrients that they have. So, you know, again, the plate doesn't really have a fat section on it. It's usually something that is added in or mixed in or that you cook with, but these are all of our best quality healthy fats listed here. It's not like a full comprehensive list. I can't fit every seed that's out there on the market on here, but it gives you a good idea. So most of your nuts and then the nut butters. So nut butters are very popular these days, like cashew butter, almond butter. Used to just be peanut butter, but we've got all kinds of different varieties out there now. And then just your whole nuts too are going to be great here. So again, sometimes people ask me which one is the best one, and I always say a variety because every nut is going to give you a little something different. So almonds have a lot of fiber in them and cashews don't have as much fiber. So if you need to add extra fiber for your day, almonds might be better for you that day. But if you're doing great on your fiber and you just love cashews, then you know you can have cashews that day. You just kind of mix and match and play around with it a little bit. It's really evens out by the end of the week. And then seeds a great source of both fiber and healthy fats, and then they also have some protein too. So not only are you getting just fat, you're getting your fiber and protein. So flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, chia seeds, all kinds of seeds here. Sesame seeds, sorry, listen. And then some others would be like avocados and actual olives. So those are always helpful additions if you're looking at your meal and you're like, ooh, I don't really have anything that's got any fat. You can always add a fourth of an avocado to your dish, and that will give you some healthy fat and fiber as well. And then your oils. So you always want to try to choose something that's liquid at room temperature. And each of these has something that's going to be beneficial about it. But anything from canola oil is usually the most popular to olive oil. Some of my Asian inspired recipes call for sesame oil. Some people like the higher smoke point of an avocado oil. You know, those are going to be okay here as well. But just to give you an idea of what, if you're looking at that 10 to 20 grams of fat at a meal, 1 tablespoon of olive oil has 14 grams of fat in it. So if you use 1 tablespoon of olive oil to cook your veggies in, that's going to be 14 grams of healthy fat for you right there. You don't necessarily have to add anything to that specific meal because you're going to be right in that range. Almonds, 23 almonds is a serving. That's about an ounce of almonds, and that's going to have 14 grams of fat in it as well. Almond butter, so if you get more like a crushed up almond butter, 2 tablespoons is a serving, and that's got about 18 grams of fat in it. So if you like to dip like your apples or your pears in a nut butter of some kind, you're going to get some healthy fat and some fiber from those and a little bit of protein too. And then walnuts, 1 ounce has 18 grams of fat, so it's a little bit higher than the almonds, but again, they're both healthy fats, so they're both fine. Flaxseed, 1 tablespoon is about 3 grams of fat. And then if you like to eat whole avocados, the entire avocado has 29 grams of fat in them. But if you eat more of like a normal, like a fourth to a half of an avocado is going to be like 7.5 grams of fat. So those are just some different portion sizes for you for the fats. And then just to dig a little deeper into the unsaturated fats, so polyunsaturated fats, those help to lower our LDL and our HDL in some people. The HDL is your good cholesterol and the LDL is your bad cholesterol. So it's a little bit of a trade-off here, but the polyunsaturated omega-3s and omega-6s, it's got that nice combination of those fatty acids to help with that inflammation. But sunflower, corn, soybean, and flaxseed oils are all good sources of polyunsaturated fat. And then also walnuts, sunflower seeds, flaxseed, tofu and soybeans, and fish are all great sources of polyunsaturated fats. And then our monounsaturated fats also help to lower our bad cholesterol. And you can find those in your canola oil, olive oil, peanut oil. It's also found in avocados. A lot of your nuts also have monounsaturated fats. A lot of these are just blended between the two groups, so you don't always have to be like, oh, I need to get my monounsaturated fat in today. It's usually a combo of a mixture of them. So as long as you're incorporating these foods throughout the week, you're going to have these healthy fats in there. But peanut butter, olives, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds are also good monounsaturated fats. So again, you want to blend. You don't have to be so specific and break it down to this level. I just wanted you guys to know. Saturated fats, a general rule is to stick around no more than 10 to 15 grams of saturated fat per day. So we know that the saturated fats raise our bad cholesterol more than anything else that we eat. So for a long time, people thought that foods that were very high in cholesterol was what was raising their cholesterol, like eggs. But now we actually know that just because a food contains cholesterol doesn't necessarily mean it's going to affect your cholesterol. It's really the saturated fat and lack of fiber that really leads to this higher bad cholesterol or your LDL cholesterol. So saturated fats are solid at room temperature. I threw a little stake up over here on the side because you can actually see all the marbling throughout it. So the white pieces that are throughout the steak, that's all saturated fat. It's going to be solid at room temperature. Butter is also a saturated fat. People always ask if they can have butter. You can always fit something into your diet if it's important to you. You just want to see where else you're getting saturated fat from and what you're willing to cut down on to make it happen. So being mindful of that. If you're able to cut some of this stuff off, that's great. Another saturated fat would be like the skin on a piece of chicken. So that's why we always say skinless chicken breast, because all the saturated fat is going to be found in the skin there. So those are just ways, trimming off visible fat that you can. So on my pork chops, I just tried to cut off that piece that was on the corner or on the edge, just to make sure I wasn't eating that. So you can always dress it up a little bit to meet your needs. And again, saturated fat from animal sources. So our goal, if you're eating these foods, is to try to choose those lean cuts of meat, poultry, fish, and then those low-fat dairy products. So, you know, skim milk, 1% milk, they skim off a lot of that milk fat that has the saturated fat. So that helps to lower the saturated fat amount in those foods. And then saturated fats are also found in coconut oil and palm oil. Who asked about coconut oil, and it is high in saturated fat. There's still a lot of research being done around the health effects. They think that it could be different, but you know, I safely can't tell you that it is or is not at this time. And so even though there's not like a section on our plate handout here, there is an entire column for healthy fats and breaks it down into monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. So again, you just want to have a variety throughout the week. You don't have to fit everything all in at every meal or every day. That would be a lot of food to try to get in. So you have a week, the whole month, just to try to squeeze in as much variety as you can. And then, of course, building your meals, we already talked about 5 to 15 grams of fiber, 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal, and then for your fat, 10 to 20 grams per meal. And you've got a whole section here that's going to fill you in on some healthy fats. So just to recap this presentation and kind of last month's presentation, you want to strive to build your meals and snacks to have all three of these macronutrients when possible. So it's not always possible. We're not perfect. Sometimes there's just, you know, a day that you can't make it happen, and that's okay, or a meal. But in general, most of the time, you should try to be adding in this fiber with your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fat. So recap, protein should be 10-5% of your total calories. That really breaks down to 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal if you're doing 3 meals per day. If you still feel a little bit hungry, or you're trying to do smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day, if you're going through treatment, shooting for 10 to 15 grams of protein per snack, and doing 1 or 2 of those per day. And then your total fat will typically be about 50 to 60 grams total per day. So that breaks down into anywhere from 10 to 20 grams of fat per meal. And then you just want to be mindful of your saturated fat, trying not to go over 10 to 15 grams in a day, and then avoiding trans fat as much as you can. And then also trying to avoid those naked carbohydrates, or only eating carbohydrates by themselves. So you want to try to pair them with a protein or a fat. So 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day, or 5 to 15 grams of fiber per meal if you want to break it down to a meal. And by eating those foods and choosing those foods, you're naturally going to be eating carbohydrate foods. So I've just switched to trying to think about my carbohydrates as fiber as much as I can, and that's really helpful to make sure I'm hitting that fiber need every day. And 25 to 35 grams of fiber is quite the accomplishment to get to at the end of the day. So if you're already doing that, or you're working towards that, like, great job. Here's a sample menu of what maybe this could look like if you were doing 3 meals per day. So a cup of fat-free Greek yogurt is going to be your protein. You could do a little kiwi with a 4th cup of mango. That's going to have some fiber in there for you and a healthy carbohydrate. And then you could do an ounce of chopped almonds, which is also going to be fiber, protein, and a healthy fat. So that's a very balanced breakfast that you can have. A lot of times when I tell people that they can't have their bacon and sausage, they're like, what am I supposed to eat for breakfast? And there's no rule that says you can't have beans or chicken or salmon at breakfast time if you're struggling with some of these breakfast meals down. Another big one that I see, people will just do oatmeal. They'll just have 1 serving of oatmeal, and they make it with water. So it doesn't have a whole lot of protein. So if you're doing oatmeal, you just want to try to think to yourself, how can I add some protein and some healthy fat in here? So you might be adding some nuts in there. You might get a protein powder that you kind of sprinkle in there just to get some protein. You might decide to make it with a milk or a milk substitute of some kind that has protein. So sometimes you just have to be a little creative to get the protein in, but really trying to get to that 20 to 30 grams at that breakfast meal will help to make you feel full, and you won't feel so hungry throughout the day. So everybody's a little bit different. Sometimes I meet people who can just eat oatmeal and they're not hungry for 6 hours. So if that's you, that's fine. I just strongly encourage trying to find a way to get some protein in. Lunchtime is usually a little bit easier. So you could do like a black bean chili. That would be a protein and a fiber source for you. So you've got your protein and also your carbohydrates through your fiber. So you can make it with black beans, onion, tomato, herbs. So it's kind of missing a fat here. So you could top it with some avocado. I like to use plain Greek yogurt instead of sour cream for toppings for stuff like chili or any kind of Taco Tuesday, or whatever I happen to be doing, because it's got some protein in there, just to add a little bit more. So you could do that. If you sauteed all this stuff in with a little bit of olive oil, that would have been your healthy fat. So you kind of have to play around with that one a little bit. And then for your dinner meal, anywhere from a 3 to 4 ounce serving of a salmon, which will be your protein and also your healthy fat. And then you could do a cup to a cup and a half of roasted Brussels sprouts with carrots mixed in. And then if you sauteed those with a tablespoon of olive oil, or you mixed them in with a tablespoon of olive oil and roasted them in the oven, that's going to be a fiber and also a healthy fat for you here. And then you can add a half cup of wild rice to give you some additional fiber throughout your day. So you'll see, like, this isn't super nitpicky. I didn't go through and pick out the exact specific grams because nutrition doesn't have to be that calculated. You know, eat until you are full. If you're trying to lose weight, then focusing on these very healthy foods with this fiber and the protein is going to help you feel full longer. To eat, you know, 12 times a day to try to curb your cravings. This is really going to give you a good foundation to kind of stick to these 3 meals a day. You're picking good quality foods here, and you're not having to fill in a bunch of snacks that might be things that you wouldn't normally eat just to kind of tide you over till your next meal. But speaking of snacks, in case you do need to add them in, these are some different snack ideas that are pairing some of these fat, fiber, and proteins in here. So you've got some hummus that's going to have fiber, protein, and some healthy fat, and you can do that with some whole wheat pita, or you could chop up a bunch of veggies, and that's going to give you fiber out of both of those. If you like to do small apples or pears, is coming up the season here in Georgia. So you can dip those in a little bit of peanut butter, or you could do almond butter or cashew butter to help give yourself a little bit of protein and some healthy fat that's going to sustain you longer so you're not having to eat as often. You can just do a cup of raw veggies that are cut up with some salad dressing. I like to make homemade ranch at home, but I use Greek yogurt. Again, it gives me some protein there in that instead of just using a regular dressing. Unsalted roasted nuts and some dried fruit is going to give you some fiber, some healthy fats, some protein. So anyways, I won't read all these to you, so we have some time for questions, but this should help point you in a little bit of a direction on how to pair those things so you're not eating those naked carbohydrates and you're not just eating crackers or some chips. This is giving you some good nutrition if you're going to do some snacks. All right, that is all I have today.
Thank you, Kristin, again for this wonderful information. I do see a question in the chat box. I was going to ask just for myself, we definitely are a peanut butter family here. I typically just do the creamy peanut butter, nothing like almond butter, anything like that from the grocery store. Is that just loaded with sugar, or should we be cautious on how much we're eating?
Yeah, you'll just have to read the food label. And if I saw a very funny thing on the internet the other day that humbled, measure out 2 tablespoons of peanut butter and actually see like what a serving looks like. It's really not that much.
Yeah.
You're used to just grabbing the jar and dipping a big thing of apple in there. You might just want to do a little bit of a reality check and measure that out to see what it looks like. And then, yes, you just kind of have to look at the food label and see if there's added sugar. Sometimes they might have some hydrogenated oils in them to help make them stay solidified on the shelf. That's why a lot of the natural peanut butters and stuff, they have all the oil at the top and it gets separated and you have to mix it together. I know that's be annoying, but that's just, it would be a healthier option.
Yeah, that makes sense. We did have a question about grains. Are they more digestible when they are sprouted?
I don't know a whole lot about sprouted grains. So I don't know that they're necessarily more digestible, but they might be. I'm not 100% sure.
All right, a few people asked about the slides for today, and I have added those to the chat box. If you aren't able to access them, we will have them on our website as well, www.cscatlanta.org, or you can email me, emily@cscatlanta.org, and I will send those to you as well as the handouts if you're interested in those. I did want to make an announcement about next month's cooking demo. We are going to focus on immune boosting soups on Wednesday, October 13th at 11. So Chef Ashley will be cooking up some delicious soups for us to welcome the fall weather, which I believe fall starts tomorrow. So everybody Get excited about that. And then Kristin will be doing another wonderful nutrition seminar on October 19th at 12 p.m. And this time the focus will be on breast cancer and nutrition. So if you are somebody that you care about in your family has been affected by breast cancer and you are interested in hearing that, please join us October 19th at 12 p.m. And we will have more information on that posted on our website soon as well. Let me see. Okay, just thank you. Very helpful information. Any other questions? You can go ahead and put those in the chat box.
I did want to say I sent Emily 2 handouts. So I sent the plate that has the columns on the backhand side to help you plug foods in and help you do your meal creation. But I also sent a vegetarian, vegan protein handout list because somebody asked for that last month. And that goes through other foods that aren't just some of your normal like beans and tofu that you would normally think of for vegan and vegetarian, that also has the protein content. So it's some of the different whole grains, like quinoa is a whole grain, but it also has protein in it. So it kind of breaks those numbers down too. So the chat box as well. And then I think I added a recipe in there for a millet side, and you could easily add, you know, a chicken breast or a piece of salmon or a thing of beans to make it a complete meal. But it would be a good side to help with fiber and just to try some different grains.
Okay, thank you, Kristin. We have had a few questions come in. Is kefir better than yogurt?
Again, I don't know why it would be better. They're similar. Kefir is a liquid yogurt or a liquid fermented dairy product. So I like to use kefir to make different soups. Some people like to drink it, and then yogurt's going to be more light and more just solid, I guess. So it really just depends on what you're using it for and which one you like. I use both of them quite frequently just to interchange, just depending on what the recipe is.
And do you have any recommendations on how to calculate calories for somebody? Should they go by their BMI, or is there an online calculator people could look up?
I would talk to a dietitian and see, because a little bit different. Like it does depend on what your goals are and what are you trying to maintain? Are you trying to lose weight? So again, if you're going through treatment and can talk to a dietitian, they would be able to give that specific number to you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you again, Kristin, and congratulations again on your success with your fiber and lowering your cholesterol.
Thank you. It was
See, everybody, she practices what she preaches, and it works.
I wasn't practicing what I preached, and I did, and it does make a huge difference. So I didn't have to go on a statin or a drug, and that made me quite happy. And they were impressed that I could do that exercise. So it can be done.
Another question about kefir: does it have more probiotics than yogurt?
You'd have to check the food label. So kefir does have probiotics in it, and so do most yogurts. A lot of the yogurts and stuff now have things added back to them after it's processed. So if it's heated up and those things are damaged, they tend to add stuff back to it, just to make sure that it's still there flourishing, so that it has significantly different kinds or amounts to them. But kefir is a great source of probiotics, but so is yogurt. They might have a little bit more, but I don't know the specific number.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again next month. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. If you're interested in other live or recorded programs, please visit the online program tab of our website, cscatlanta.org, or follow us on Facebook. We'll be sharing additional information on upcoming programs.